Personal flavor, the debt of conscious living. For those of us long accustomed to concepts like self-actualization and individuality, the word debt might initially feel like a step backward. Doesn't modern psychology constantly advise us to first find ourselves, set our boundaries, and only then, if energy remains, turn our attention to others? Yet Erikson employs a subtle irony here. He suggests that the self, as an independent entity detached from history, is merely a comfortable illusion. The truth is that we do not possess an original capital to invest. Rather, we are the heirs to an ancient garden. Our language, our unconscious patterns, even our ways of loving, all of these were shaped in the throats of our ancestors long before we came to invent them ourselves. Erikson calls this debt, but if we look closely, he strips the term of its dry moral weight and gives it an ontological hue. Our debt is, in essence, our existential dependence, and denying it does not lead to independence, but to an identity crisis. Personal flavor, the secret of repayment. In one of his most delicate formulations, Erikson defines a psychologically healthy individual as someone who can take what they have received from previous generations, add their own personal flavor to it, and pass it on as a gift to the next generation. And he immediately adds that this is the repayment of life's debt. But within the same vein of thought, he offers a second statement, perhaps even bolder than the first. Repaying life's debt is, in fact, the greatest gift we can give to ourselves. These two sentences will be the axis of our conversation. To grasp their full depth, it might be helpful to briefly revisit the framework in which Erikson cultivated these ideas. He introduces them in the midst of his discussion on generativity versus stagnation, that stage of life where the question of "who am I?" has largely subsided, and a new inquiry emerges. Can I leave behind something worthy of being lived again? This is precisely where debt enters the picture, not as a dry moral obligation, but as an existential truth. Copying is forbidden. Creativity is mandatory. The pinnacle of this theory, however, lies in the decisive distinction Erikson draws between repayment and mere copying. Perhaps our greatest temptation as educated individuals is to preserve tradition like a precious heirloom, handing it down untouched to the next generation. But Erikson explicitly argues that this is stagnation, not generativity. Adding personal flavor means daring to contaminate the heritage with our own presence. It means openly filtering an outdated belief through the sieve of our lived experience, or even discarding those parts of the inheritance that have turned toxic for our time. This act is a creativity laced with risk, because you no longer have the safe shield of repeating the ancestors. You are now accountable for the version you have rewritten yourself. The paradox of giving to oneself. Now, let us turn to Erikson's second statement, which we read at the outset, where he claims that this debt is the greatest gift to ourselves. Here, we encounter a delightful paradox. In today's world, we have become so fixated on self-care and mindfulness that we sometimes mistake self-care for a retreat into the fortress of our private selves. But Erikson holds up a mirror to show us that the greatest service to the self is, in fact, an exit from its narrow confines. When we pass the chain of history across the bridge of our own existence, we cease to fear decay or obsolescence. The anxiety of death gives way to ego integrity, a peace that does not come from indifference, but from the certitude of having left a profound imprint through our being. Rethinking how we live. For those of us inclined toward study and reflection, this invitation calls for a fundamental reassessment. Let us ask ourselves, have we merely been good receivers, a secure repository for the data of the past? Or have we had the audacity to add the seasoning of our own unique perspective to the human equation? Are we striving to build something that will refresh the breath of others long after we are gone, even if that something is merely an honest human connection or a small correction to a prevalent misconception? The privilege of being. Ultimately, repaying this debt is not a duty. It is an exclusive privilege of conscious living. Perhaps the sweetest moment of life is the twilight hour, when we can say to ourselves, I was indebted, but I managed to settle my account with coins that bore my own image. That is when we realize that life was never a cruel creditor. It was merely waiting to see us fully emerge as a mature giver.